So then, if it's like the Shadow, it's like they all have goatees and stuff like that. Like they're like
some of them, yeah, or craggy faces.
Oh, craggy, like Bizarro.
Like Bizarro.
I gotcha. Hey everybody, welcome. We're so glad you could join us today. Oh man, I hope you have like your favorite safety blanket and a nightlight is flipped on because we're taking a spooky journey into the Shadow Plane of Starfinder. And to do that, wait till you see the cosplay that he's got going. It's kind of a thing. If you've been on our message boards, then you know that Jason always dresses up. And this time he does not fail to deliver. Everybody, I'd like you to welcome Jason Keeley to the show.
Boo!
Hey! And so
I'm dressed as the cover of number 13. 12. Number 12.
Number
Yes.
12. It's your good buddy Dan. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. We were just kind of chatting before the show started. And so we were trying to get our heads around what we want to talk about and everything like that. And a bit was going through some of the images that you sent, and there's some good stuff in there. I'm really excited to get into that. So I know, the cosplay is pretty scary. I'm sorry about that. I should have
Content
warned
warning.
you.
Yeah.
That's my fault. Let's see. Tonight should be a good night. Hey, little muffin, how are you? Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. So today, if you haven't heard, we're gonna take a deep dive into the Shadow Plane.
That's right.
Jason basically came up and said we need to do this, and I know very little about the Starfinder version of the Shadow Plane. So this is going to be really good because I'm going to be learning a lot myself.
Great.
So to start off with, let's talk about what the Shadow Plane is.
Right.
Like, let's start at the very beginning and go with that.
Okay, so just to give you a full-on sort of baseline, everything, the universe, the galaxy of Starfinder, Packworlds, Veskarium, all that are on what's known as the material plane. That's the sort of just baseline universe. But it casts a dark shadow on another plane of existence, and that is known as the Shadow Plane. A Shadow Plane is kind of a buffer between the material plane and the negative energy plane, which is just where no life, it's just all death and badness.
Okay.
So that sort of the interference there creates what's the Shadow Plane, which is basically kind of like the Upside Down from Stranger Things.
Okay.
It's a dark reflection.
But it's scarier.
Yes.
Does it look like there's dust all over everything?
Even with, I think it kind of emphasizes decay and rot.
Okay.
And darkness, and that sort of thing.
So then, so now if I'm at the Shadow Plane, like if I'm at Absalom Station, non-Shadow Plane version of Absalom Station, right? And I'm like, I'm going to go to Akaton, right? I can do that.
You can do that in many ways.
If I'm in the Shadow Plane, can I be at the Shadow version of Absalom Station and go, I'm going to go to Akaton?
That's right. And the thing about the Shadow Plane is if you get into a spaceship on the Shadow Plane and travel, or even just walk, and not walk from Absalom Station to Akaton, but if you were on Akaton and you wanted to walk all the way around the planet, it would take you far less time. It's not exactly as fast as traveling faster than light with the drift in hyperspace, but just by walking from point A to point B on a planet in the Shadow Plane, it'll take you far less time.
Really?
So yeah, all distances are kind of compressed and fluid.
So now, can you use that as a method of getting from one place to another?
It is exactly what was used as a method for some people. The worshippers of Zon Kuthan, Velstrax, also known as Chitons, would have these shadow drives, what they're called, and we can show you a Kuthite ship there. What that does is, in normal space, it'll take you from a material plane, jump you into the Shadow Plane, travel in the Shadow Plane for a bit, and jump back out at your destination, and it'll take less time than it would travel normal. If you went through conventional space.
Okay, so now they're saying, so in the chat it's like the moving walkways at the airport.
A little bit,
it's kind of like that. Like it just kind of pushes you just a little bit faster.
Just get you don't really. It's not like. I guess things kind of seem to move by fast. You don't feel like you're running.
Right.
You're going in normal space, but you just happen to get to where you're going faster because everything is a little more fluid.
Okay, so now let's talk a little bit more about this ship, the Kuthite ship.
Yes.
So now the purpose of this ship is that it is made to jump in and out of the Shadow Plane.
Right, which is not necessarily a pleasant experience.
Right. So that's the next. So there's got to be a draw. Like, what's the drawback to using the shadow plane as a means of travel.
Well, and at least in terms of old Galarian and Pathfinder, there are a bunch of spells like Shadow Walk and that sort of thing that sort of let you do that, and those kind of go off without any sort of hitch. But I think if you want to use that as sort of a massive ways to travel, there's a lot of bad things on the shadow plane because it is so connected to the negative energy plane and undeath and all that sort of thing. There are you're going to attract the attention of things. Most likely, maybe even of Velstrax, if you're not one of their allies. They're going to notice you, because that's one of, they claim dominion to a lot of the shadow plane, and they're going to see you flying by, and they're like, well, we got our own spaceships. We're going to hunt you down and, slowly peel the flesh from your body.
Might as well make it memorable, I guess.
Yes, exactly.
And so right now I'm showing off Count Velstrax.
That is a Cantor Velstrax.
Cantor. Oh, you know
yes.
what? I wrote it wrong on my stream deck.
That's fair enough.
I'm sorry.
It is a Velstrax that kind of is about the size of a human child or halfling and has no skin.
Oh, they're little fellas.
And which makes them all the more creepy, in my opinion. If they're just
Phantasm.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
A lot of the Velstrax imagery is kind of like borrowed from movies like Hellraiser and Phantasm. So they have a lot of like real creepy nonsense going on.
Okay, so then, so these things right there, those are small. I assume they're evil.
Yeah.
And what sort of attack could you expect from something like that?
Oh gosh.
Or is that too spoilery?
They may appear in the Signal of Screams Adventure Path. So may not.
And that's the other thing. I wanted to make sure we talk about this. This is the Signal of Screams, Heart of Night, and some of. Pretty much most of the stuff that we're showing today is from here.
A lot of it is, yeah.
Okay.
There's an article on the Shadow Plane in there written by Thurston Hillman,
On Call GM. Welcome,
a good friend.
He just said that's how you get Velstrax. Ants in parentheses.
Oh.
So we do kind of want to be a little careful with some of the information.
I'm not going to give you any spoilers to the adventure.
Okay, perfect.
For sure.
Good, because I didn't put that spoiler tag on the show.
There's no, and maybe it's a tiny spoiler that the Shadow Plane is important to this adventure path.
Right.
But at this point, you probably already knew that.
Yeah, you probably did.
Yeah.
I would imagine. Okay, so we've got that. Now let's talk about are there other ways to get there besides the ship?
It is mostly magic that you would use to get there. Because the advent of the drift, no one has really decided that it would be better to figure out ways to move through the Shadow Plane through technological means, because the drift is generally safer and less spooky.
Yeah.
So magic and magical accidents probably would be one way you could, if you end up there even though you didn't want to.
Right. So then getting there, so in terms of geography, if you're familiar with your current surroundings and you go to the Shadow Plane, you pretty much know your way around.
You're gonna you're gonna be familiar, but you might be surprised by what you find.
Okay.
Because there are beings on the Shadow Plane that may alter it or what have you, or the fact that it's its own mutability is affecting the landscape in a certain way.
Okay.
So you might go to a place where there's a tall building here, but when you go on the Shadow Plane, it's just a crater.
Okay.
Because of rotten decay, or just because someone smashed the shadow building down, or that building has not enough presence to sort of make itself appear on the Shadow Plane.
Okay.
So because it is a reflection.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So if something is newer, does it automatically appear on the other side, or does it take a while to build up some energy, or
it may or may not? It's not really clear, and there's no exact.
To make it up, right?
Yeah, you get to make it up
exactly.
Right, well, I mean, for GMs and running this, it doesn't really, if you want something, if it is important, it probably has a reflection on the Shadow Plane.
I got you.
But if it's just sort of like mundane, whatever, it's probably not going to be that at all interesting.
Nice.
So,
okay. All right. Well,
that's what I would say.
Let's talk about this then. Let's talk about since the geography is pretty much roughly the same, some differences, but roughly the same. What kind of inhabitants am I going to run into besides, like, we've already looked at one?
Yeah.
But what, in general, am I looking at, like, if on Absalom, again, going back to my first idea.
Right.
If if I'm at Absalom Station and there's a Yosoki sitting on a crate right there, and then I go to the Shadow Plane, is there a Shadow Yosoki sitting on a Shadow crate?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
They're not necessarily shadowy reflections of every being, but there is a Shadow Absalom Station, which is kind of in the same general area where Absalom Station is. It's not as neat, even though Absalom Station itself can be kind of a wreck in places. It's more of a the Shadow Absalom Station is way more of a conglomeration of old ships and debris and whatnot that have sort of been pulled together to do business on. Basically, there's a council there of beings, but there's a lot of other just natives to the Shadow Plane.
Okay.
We've got creatures we don't have a picture of them for Starfinder yet, but they're called Desiriacs. They're basically humanoid termites with glowing patterns on their skin. They're pretty cool. We've got Shadow Giants, which we do have a picture of.
Yeah, I'm pulling that one up right there.
Yes, big people who just like that spike chain look. Often worshippers of Zon-Kuthon themselves, and they tromp around the Shadow Plane. So you might, find yourselves on a planet inhabited solely by Shadow Giants.
Which doesn't seem fun.
No, it's not going to be fun for you.
And now this is the other thing too, is the first image that we saw was a very small humanoid creature.
Yeah.
And with no scale, like I didn't put a quarter next to the thing, but that is actually a very large creature.
It's big.
Okay, perfect.
Large size. And let's see. We can move away from some humanoid creatures. If you want to see something that's not humanoid,
I absolutely do.
Let's take a look at the Excaliad, which is basically an eyeball ghost.
No, okay, so this is a ghost.
It's not really a ghost, but it's kind of shaped like a ghost. They're kind of new. They have appeared more recently. Some would think during the gap they just sort of showed up as residents in the Shadow Plane, and even longtime residents of the Shadow Plane don't really know what their deal is. But they're essentially big goos made out of eyeballs. I can see chat just going off there.
This is the thing of nightmares. I mean, this thing is really creepy.
It is creepy as heck. And here's the thing: no one knows what they want. No one is able to talk to them. So they're there, just sort of floating around, doing their thing, and they can shape their eyeballs into different forms, basically.
So they can kind of, so they always look like eyeballs in
a big eyeball
cake
goo.
batter.
Yeah,
but they can morph that into different shapes.
Yeah,
like shmoo or whatever.
Maybe
it was.
Shmoo-ish, yeah, a little shmoo.
Yeah, okay, I gotcha.
Probably not going to be like it's shaped exactly like a hammer. It's going to bash you on the head. Probably not so cartoony, but if they want to look humanoid, they probably could. But
let's get another look at that thing.
If they wanted to,
the thing it's great.
Oh boy!
And I like his little tentacle hands and everything.
Sometimes you gotta pick things
and
up.
He's kind of got a genie flare going at the bottom, like he's coming out of a lamp.
Eyeball genie.
And they bathe in eye drops. They just fill a bathtub up with Visine and jump in and roll around. I like that one. That one's really good. So I would imagine that without having, and again, maybe this is spoiler, I'm not sure, but these creatures are regional. Like, are they just everywhere?
Oh, and the Shadow Plane. Well, it's like probably not everywhere because the Shadow Plane being as big as the material plane, which is of course infinite.
Yeah.
There's probably sections where there may be more inhabited than other places.
Fair. Fair. Okay.
Yeah.
And everyone. So that's true. The picture, it just invites more questions. Like,
sure. Yeah.
I feel like I could do a whole show on this thing. I mean,
well, we don't know much about them.
Well, and so now is that so? The good thing about that is that means that if you're playing one in your campaign or whatever, you get some free reign and kind of play around with it.
Yeah, if you want to bring them as a Shadow Plane threat onto the material plane for your campaign, or go to the Shadow Plane a bunch in your campaign and find out what their deal is. We don't know. We have no idea. No one knows. So there's that. That's the Excaliad. Excaliad. I keep wanting to put the emphasis on the wrong side. Excaliad. Yes, sure. It. There you go. Okay. So what else do we see in the Shadow Plane? And actually, there was a really good question that came up in chat really quick. As far as like gravity and atmosphere and all that sort of thing, is that roughly the same? It's roughly the same. What isn't the same is light. Everything, there is an ever-present kind of like dim light everywhere on the Shadow Plane, so you can kind of see. But if you bring your own light, it'll not be as good. The flashlight won't shine as far. And
does dark vision help that, or is it different type of?
Dark vision will keep you. You will still be the same. You'll be able to see 60 feet or whatever it is in the dark. But it's not quite, because it isn't darkness. It's never dark. On the Shadow Plane, it's just dim, like just kind of like sunset dim, all the time. And if you look up, the sky will be dark. You won't necessarily. It's not that there aren't stars out there. There are. That light doesn't come far enough, so it'll just like looking up to a big blank black sky.
Interesting. Okay, so now there's so many things about this that there seems to be in my brain, and so maybe it's just me. I don't know, but it seems like there's this weird disconnect for me from the normal. I don't know, the non-shadow plane,
the regular plane,
material plane to the shadow plane, to where what makes it out, what makes it in, what all of that sort of thing, and is a lot of that kind of just kind of left up to the interpretation on purpose, or
I mean, like they're like, what gets reflected and what doesn't.
All of
A lot of that is sort of open to interpretation for various adventures and campaigns. If we need something to be on the Shadow Plane, we'll put it on the Shadow Plane. For instance, there is on the planet of Verces, and this. Well, I'll just say it. There is a structure known as Skydock, which is a massive sort of orbital tether that dates back to even before the gap, from when Verces used to have a lot of starship travel, aether ships before there were massive travel. So basically a big space elevator is what this is.
Okay.
And because it's so big and important, it does have a reflection on the Shadow Plane, and that's what it looks like. You're looking at right there, and it does play a part in some areas that who's got control over it. It's obviously not the same people who have control over it on regular Verces. So stuff like that. If we need that for an adventure, we're going to use it.
It's usable. You could pop that in.
Yeah.
So then, is there any kind of structure? Is there any kind of I don't want to. It's not like there's a king or anything like that, but is there like a government body in the Shadow Plane?
Well, it depends on like the whole universe doesn't have a single. Like the galaxy of Starfinder doesn't have a single place, a single government, right? It has various governments and planet governments and dominions and all sorts of things, federations and whatnot. So yeah, there's lots of that. Basically, the Shadow Plane is basically a spooky universe where anything you need to be spooky in it, right? Is as big as the regular universe, so it has just lots to do in it, lots to see in it. There's a shadow version of the Veskarium with weird hairless skittermanders in it that are not very helpful at all.
So shadow skittermanders. Shadowmanders.
Yes.
No hair.
I guess. And still 6 arms, still big mouths, no hair.
All right, so it's the Skittermander you know and love, but just
shaved.
Put nair all over it.
Yeah, just
and
naired
no
up.
more hair.
Yeah, and evil.
Interesting.
And
I don't have an
evil.
image of that one.
No, we don't have an image of that one. I was reading through the article and refreshing myself on it, and I was like, oh, those. Oh, all right. Well, that sparked my imagination.
So now Mark Moreland is asking if that's canon. That is canon.
It's canon. It's in a book.
It's in a book. Take a look.
Reading Rainbow. Reading Graybow, I guess, because it's the Shadow Plane.
I got it. Yeah, the Shadow Plane. That's
Yay.
Spider-Manders. Okay, so let's do this. I keep getting off topic here.
That's fine.
I'm sorry. So I've got a couple more images that I want to get to here. And one of them, you've told me how to say this name a couple of times, and I keep forgetting how to say it.
This could be one of two.
Oh, it's Svartalfar.
The Svartalfar.
Svartalfar.
Right.
Svartalfar.
The Svartalfar are almost sort of also based on mythology too, and they are Fae from the First World who have been exiled to the Shadow Plane.
Oh.
So they were already kind of creepy and elf-like, right, to begin with. And so but the rest of the Fae were like, I don't know, unspecified reasons, probably involving tragedy and horror, sent out. They can't get back to the First World. They kind of sometimes get to the material plane, but they mostly have their own Shadow Plane goings on.
Okay.
And they're not nice either. They're generally not nice.
I gotcha. So is it kind of like because obviously if these are been banished there, this is now their homeworld. This is where they live.
Right, exactly.
And is that pretty common where it's like these are things that are only here? This like Skittermander, Dark Skittermander or Shadow Skittermander or whatever you want to call it. They have another counterpart to the material plane.
Right.
Does everything have that, or is this kind of one of those few that's like, nope, they're just here. That's all they do.
Yeah, I mean, you could say that the counterpart to the Svartalfar are regular elves almost, right?
Okay.
Or regular fae. Not everything has a 100%. Like the Shadow Skittermanders has a 100% clone, right? So there are things that do sort of match up a little bit. For instance, way back when, in Galarian times, pre-Galarian times even, some humans decided, Earthfall's coming. We're going to go hide out on the Shadow Plane for a teeny bit and avoid all that destruction. Unfortunately, they got trapped there. And now, even in these are in Pathfinder well, but we've kept them going for Starfinder. They've evolved, basically evolved, for lack of a better word. They've adapted to the Shadow Plane.
Right.
And they are humanoids known as Kyals, or Fetchlings, and they live on the Shadow Plane and kind of sometimes act as emissaries between them. They might be the friendliest people you would meet on the Shadow Plane.
Really? Could you have a drink with one?
You could have a drink with many of these people if you don't mind having a drink with some shady characters. But these people are probably the most friendly on there. They would build the civilizations where you could probably do some trade with, act as a home base or a rest space while you were traveling on the Shadow Plane. And they would more or less. Some of them are bad, obviously.
Just like
any human, or any other species. But for the most part, they're generally neutral. So they will, as long as you're not a jerk to them, they won't be a jerk to you.
Right. But these actually, they can trace their roots all the way back to
human.
Galarian.
Yeah, exactly.
Back in those times. Do they know anything about the Gap?
No, of course not.
Because
everything's been erased. I mean, now,
I'm just looking for loopholes that are going to come up at some point.
It's all gone.
Okay, so that's pretty amazing. I love that image too. It's such a good, image. Let's see, and now I've got two more. I've got two more images.
Oh, sure.
And one of them I just wrote. So it's an Absalom Shadow Absalom crest.
Right. It's just, the symbol of Shadow Absalom, basically. Shadow Absalom Station, I should say.
And so that would be for the denizens of Shadow Absalom.
Yeah, you might see that on the wall, or someone who's like got that on their ship for just to say, hey, I'm from Shadow Absalom Station.
Okay.
And I owe my allegiance to the council or whatever runs that.
And so when it gets into different areas, like where I'd kind of half jokingly before said you could go to the pub and have a drink with Kyle. Kyle. Is that and is that something that could happen? Like people going through the Shadow Plains, like, hey, let's just go to the local inn and get a drink? Or...
There are fewer of those places like that. I would imagine they're not just tons of towns everywhere because everything's so dim. There's not a ton of like plant life, and what it is all stunted and gray and whatnot. So there's not like a lot that can sustain life on the Shadow Plane. Obviously, people make do with especially with technology and whatnot. It's maybe a little easier in Starfinder, but it's gonna be tricky to find a nice, cozy place to hang out.
Right.
Even if you built a fire, it's not gonna give off as much light, so it's not gonna be as nice.
Okay.
I mean, it's pleasant.
With the lack of light, does that mean that it's generally colder?
It's a good question. Yeah, it's not quite freezing.
The first time I've ever heard that in Starfinder Wednesday had to happen at some point.
I imagine it's like chilly. Not quite cold enough to be like, oh, I'm freezing, but like definitely it's probably very chilly.
Okay, so the lack of light does have an effect on the temperature. Okay, and then
scientifically, I would imagine that would have to be the case.
Yeah. The last thing I have is a mystic.
Oh right, yes. So we're talking about like people on the Shadow Plane and whatnot, but those are people on the material plane, such as those who might worship Zon Kuthan or some other deities who might want to get the power of shadow for themselves. So here in the Shadow Plane article, we have a shadow mystic connection. So
Okay.
it's a new class option for mystics. It will let you do fun shadowy things like do little shadow jumps and dim the light and I think there's maybe even like a shadow bolt kind of like power.
Nice.
Yeah.
So then that way, being in the shadow plane, you still have some fun things to do.
Right, yeah, I mean, you can do this in the material plane. You can be like, I just like shadow a whole bunch, and I'm going to worship it, and bring that darkness to the regular world.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. All right, well, we've come up on a half hour.
Oh, we have.
That was
so
fast.
Yeah.
I know. Well, we had a lot of cool stuff to show off, too. And
I didn't even get to mention the home of Zon Kuthan, which is in the Shadow Plane.
Well, here, hang on. Maybe this is a thing.
Yeah.
I like to end off some of these things with, if you were setting up a homebrew in the Shadow Plane, right, and you had your story all going, and you're like, well, we're in the Shadow Plane, so we have to make sure that we go to X, Y, or Z and check this thing out. What is that thing in the Shadow Plane that you would make sure, if you were running a game, that you would bring the party to and kind of have fun with and show off?
Yeah, I mean, I think just going to the domain of Zon Kuthan, which is called Zovarian with like an X, XOV, is going to be spooky as heck, and got to show that off. Filled with Velstrax, doing all sorts of terrible things to each other and themselves. Chains hanging from everywhere.
Like Cenobites?
100%.
Really?
Hellraiser. 100% Hellraiser.
So it's total Hellraiser.
It's total,
creepy. I like that. And then just when you think it couldn't get any worse, one of these things runs up.
Yeah, it's like, hey, how's it going? I made eyeballs. Oh, didn't think they would sound like that.
I'm glad that they do now.
Yeah.
In my head, that's how they're going to sound all the time.
It's canon.
All right. So let's. I'm going to do a goodbye.
Yep.
And we'll do a sign off, and then we'll talk to the chat a little bit more
Love
and answer some questions. So, all right.
Let's do it.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. I hope you learned a lot about the Shadow Planes of Starfinder. I know I did. If you couldn't tell by the previous 30 minutes, I didn't know very much about it at all. So it was a lot of fun to learn more. If there was something that you would like to see in an upcoming show, let me know down in the comments, and I will do my best to put that on the schedule. And in the meantime, for Paizo and for Jason Keeley and for me, I'm your old buddy Dan. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you again next time. Bye.
Bye.